The day the Vakari fleet appeared above Earth was supposed to be humanity's proudest moment. We had finally made official first contact with an advanced alien civilization. The news channels were going crazy. People were celebrating in the streets. World leaders were preparing their speeches about unity and the dawn of a new age. But that celebration lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. That's how long it took for Ambassador Chen to receive the Vakari's actual message. I was there in the security briefing room when she walked in, her face drained of all color. She didn't say anything at first. Just placed her tablet on the conference table and let us read it ourselves. The message was simple. Brutally simple. We are the Vakari supremacy. You are harboring 1,247 of our property. Return them immediately or face consequences. Property. That single word made my stomach turn. I'm Captain Sarah Martinez, by the way. At the time, I was head of Earth's newly formed Interstellar Relations Security Division. Basically, I was supposed to handle situations exactly like this one, except nobody actually thought we'd need to handle something like this. Property. General Hawkins slammed his fist on the table. What the hell are they talking about? Ambassador Chen pulled up another file. We've been cross-referencing. Over the past 15 years, we've granted asylum to exactly 1,247 individuals who claimed to be escaping persecution. We thought they were refugees from various conflicts across the galaxy. They integrated into our society. They have jobs, families, lives. And now their former government wants them back, I said, my mind racing through the implications. It's worse than that, Chen continued. According to Vakari law, these individuals are classified as indentured servants, essentially slaves. They escaped, and the Vakari consider them stolen property. The room went silent. We all knew what this meant. Earth's first contact with an advanced alien civilization wasn't going to be about sharing technology or cultural exchange. It was going to be about whether we'd hand over 1,247 people to a life of slavery. What's our response time? I asked. They gave us 72 hours, Chen said. After that, they didn't specify consequences, but their fleet has enough firepower to glass half the planet. I had met some of these refugees. There was Kira, who worked at the coffee shop near my apartment. She made the best lattes in the city and was saving up to go to medical school. There was Tom, who taught mathematics at the university and had helped my nephew get through calculus. There was Zara, who ran a small bakery and made these incredible pastries that combined alien and human recipes. They were people. They had dreams. They had become part of our world. We need to contact the refugees, I said. They deserve to know what's happening. We also need to prepare for war, Hawkins added grimly. Because I already know what the answer's going to be. He was right. Over the next 24 hours, we gathered representatives from the refugee community. The meeting was held in a secure facility outside Geneva. I'll never forget walking into that room and seeing their faces. They knew something was wrong. They could probably sense it the moment the Vakari fleet arrived. Kira was there, her usually cheerful expression replaced with quiet terror. They found us, she whispered. They actually found us. Ambassador Chen explained the situation as gently as possible. We had 48 hours left to make a decision. The room erupted in panic. Some people started crying. Others sat in stunned silence. A few started making plans to run, even though we all knew there was nowhere in the solar system they could hide from a fleet that advanced. Then Tom stood up. He was a tall, slender being with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. He raised one hand for silence. I need to say something, he began, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. When I escaped the Vakari, I knew they would never stop looking for me. I knew that one day they might find me. But I also knew that even one day of freedom was worth the risk. He looked around the room at his fellow refugees. We all knew this could happen, and now it has. But here's what I also know. In the 15 years I've lived among humans, I've learned something about your species. You have this strange, stubborn quality. You don't like being told what to do. You especially don't like bullies. A small smile crossed his face. So I'm going to ask you all something. If the choice were yours, what would you want humanity to do? We can't ask them to go to war for us, Zara said, tears streaming down her face. They've been so kind to us, but we can't ask them to die for us. Maybe we don't have to ask, Kira said quietly. Maybe they'll choose on their own. She was right. The decision was already being made, not in government chambers or military headquarters, but in living rooms and coffee shops and workplaces across the planet. Social media exploded with the hashtag #Couldn'tBeMe. People were sharing stories about their alien neighbors, co-workers, and friends. Protests formed outside government buildings with people holding signs that said, "Not our property," and "Earth doesn't negotiate with slavers." I watched the news coverage with a mixture of pride and terror. Humanity was making its choice, but I knew the cost could be catastrophic. The Vakari weren't bluffing about their firepower. Our military analysts had been studying their fleet composition. We had exactly 0% chance of winning a direct military confrontation. But General Hawkins had a different idea. "We can't beat them in a straight fight," he said at the emergency session of the UN Security Council. "But we don't have to. We just need to make it too expensive for them to take what they want by force." "Explain," the Secretary General demanded. "The Vakari are bureaucrats," Hawkins said, pulling up intelligence reports. "Their entire society is built on rules, hierarchies, and property rights. They're not warriors. They're administrators with big guns. They showed up here expecting us to fold immediately because that's what every other species has done when faced with their fleet." "So what do we do?" Ambassador Chen asked. "We call their bluff," I said, suddenly understanding Hawkins' plan. "We make them commit to a fight they don't actually want." The plan was insane. It was dangerous. It could get billions of people killed. But it was also the only plan that had any chance of working. With 36 hours left on the Vakari deadline, we sent our response. I was chosen to deliver it. Me, a captain who'd never expected to be making first contact with aliens, let alone telling them to shove their ultimatum. But apparently, my military record combined with my diplomatic training made me the ideal candidate. Lucky me. The transmission was broadcast globally. Every human on Earth could watch as I sat in that chair, looked directly into the camera that would send my image to the Vakari flagship, and delivered humanity's answer. "This is Captain Sarah Martinez of Earth, speaking on behalf of the United Nations and the people of this planet. We have received your demand regarding the 1,247 individuals you claim as property. We have reviewed your request carefully and consulted with all relevant parties. Our response is as follows." I paused, knowing that the next words would change everything. "No." I let that single word hang in the air for a moment. "The individuals you seek are not property. They are sentient beings who sought refuge on our planet, and we granted them asylum under our laws. They have committed no crimes under our jurisdiction. They have built lives here. They are, by every definition that matters to us, people. And we do not return people to slavery." The Vakari response came within minutes. Their ambassador, a tall being with gray skin and too many joints in its arms, appeared on screen. Its face was expressionless, but I could hear the anger in its voice. "You do not understand your position, human. We have 47 warships in orbit around your planet. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy your largest cities. You have no defense against us. You will comply or you will suffer." This was the moment. Everything hinged on what I said next. "You're right," I said calmly. "We can't stop you from destroying our cities. Our military analysts estimate you could kill approximately 3 billion humans in the first wave of attacks. Maybe 4 billion if you're thorough. But here's what you need to understand about humans, Ambassador. We're spiteful creatures. If you start killing us, we won't surrender. We'll make you kill every last one of us. All 8 billion of us." I leaned forward. "And while you're doing that, we'll be fighting back. We might not have your technology, but we have nuclear weapons. Lots of them. Chemical weapons. Biological weapons. We have suicide bombers and guerrilla fighters and people who will spend the rest of their lives making your occupation as expensive as possible. You want those 1,247 people? You'll have to kill billions to get them. And I promise you, Ambassador, we'll make sure some of those billions take your people with them." The Vakari ambassador's expression finally changed. It looked confused. "This is irrational," it said. "You would sacrifice billions of your own people for 1,247 individuals who are not even your species?" "Yeah," I said. "We would. Because here's the thing you don't get about humans. We're not rational. We're emotional. We're stubborn. And we really, really hate bullies. Those 1,247 individuals became our people the moment they asked us for help. And we don't abandon our people." I stood up. "So here's your choice, Ambassador. You can leave peacefully, and we can pretend this never happened. Maybe in a few decades, when you've updated your laws and stopped enslaving people, we can try this first contact thing again. Or you can start a war that will cost you thousands of ships, tens of thousands of soldiers, and decades of occupation for 1,247 people who will probably kill themselves before letting you take them back. Your call." The transmission ended. The waiting began. General Hawkins found me in the observation deck an hour later. I was staring at the holographic display showing the Vakari fleet's positions. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen," he said. "Probably both," I admitted. "Do you think it worked?" "We're about to find out." The Vakari fleet was moving. My heart sank. This was it. They were going to attack. But then something strange happened. They weren't taking offensive positions. They were regrouping, consolidating. And then, one by one, their ships began to move away from Earth. "They're leaving," Hawkins whispered. "I'll be damned. They're actually leaving." The final transmission from the Vakari came 12 hours later. It was brief and formal. The Vakari supremacy recognizes that the costs of retrieval exceed the value of the assets in question. We are withdrawing from Earth space. However, be advised that the 1,247 individuals in question remain property of the Vakari state under our laws. Their presence on your world constitutes ongoing theft. We will address this matter through diplomatic channels. It wasn't exactly a victory. More like a postponement. But we'd bought time. Time for the refugees to truly become part of Earth. Time for us to build better defenses. Time for the galaxy to see that humanity wasn't going to be pushed around. I went to Kira's coffee shop the next morning. She saw me coming and immediately started making my usual order. When she handed me the latte, I saw tears in her eyes. "You could have died," she said softly. "All of you. For us." "Yeah," I said. "Could have. But we didn't. And you're still here. That's what matters." "Why?" she asked. "Why would humans risk so much for people who aren't even their own species?" I thought about that question. I thought about every human who'd stood up and said, "Not on my planet." I thought about the protests and the social media posts and the millions of ordinary people who'd been ready to go to war for neighbors they'd never met. "Because that's what we do," I finally said. "We're humans. We take in strays. We fight for the underdog. We stand up to bullies. Is it rational? Is it smart? Probably not. But it's who we are." Kira smiled through her tears. "You humans are crazy." "Yeah," I agreed. "We really are." But the story didn't end there. It was just beginning. The Vakari had retreated, but they hadn't given up. And over the next few months, we learned that the galaxy was watching. Other species had heard about what happened at Earth. Some were impressed. Others were horrified. A few were very, very interested. 3 months after the Vakari fleet left, we received another transmission. This one was from a species called the Torvan Collective. They sent a simple message. "We have 3,842 individuals seeking asylum from the Vakari supremacy. We are willing to transport them to Earth if you will accept them. We warn you that the Vakari will demand their return. Will you still take them?" I was in the meeting when that message arrived. The debate was intense. We'd barely survived the first confrontation with the Vakari. Could we really take on more refugees knowing it would provoke another crisis? But then Ambassador Chen pulled up the footage from the refugee centers we'd established. The original 1,247 refugees had become advocates, teachers, and counselors. They were helping humanity understand the broader galaxy. They were sharing knowledge and technology in exchange for the sanctuary we'd provided. They were, in every way that mattered, contributing members of our society. We set a precedent, Chen said. If we back down now, we're telling the galaxy that our principles only apply when it's convenient. The vote was unanimous. We sent our response to the Torvin Collective. Send them. We'll take them all. That's when things got really complicated. The Vakari didn't just send one fleet this time. They sent 3. And they brought friends. 4 other species that practiced various forms of indentured servitude had joined them, worried that Earth was setting a dangerous example. We were facing 7 alien fleets with a combined total of over 200 warships. Our chances had gone from 0% to absolutely 0%. But something else was happening too. Species that opposed slavery were reaching out to us. Some offered intelligence. Others offered diplomatic support. A few even offered military assistance, though their numbers were small. The galaxy, it seemed, was divided on the question of Earth. And humans, being humans, decided to double down. We didn't just accept the 3,842 refugees from the Torvin Collective. We sent out a broadcast to the entire galaxy. I delivered it again, because apparently, I'd become the unofficial spokesperson for humanity's collective insanity. This is Captain Sarah Martinez of Earth. We're broadcasting this message to every species, every government, every civilization that can hear us. If you are fleeing slavery, oppression, or persecution, Earth will take you. We don't care what species you are. We don't care where you're from. We don't care if taking you in makes us enemies of half the galaxy. If you need sanctuary, we will provide it. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, 47 different species were requesting permission to send refugees to Earth. The numbers were staggering. Over 50,000 individuals seeking asylum. We can't defend them all, General Hawkins said grimly. If 7 fleets showed up over the first group, imagine what they'll send for 50,000. Then we'd better get ready, I said. And that's exactly what we did. Humanity mobilized like never before. We converted every available resource into defense production. We reached out to the species that supported us and started trading for technology. We trained soldiers. We built bunkers. We prepared for a war we couldn't win. But we also did something else. Something that would change the entire equation. We went public. We didn't just tell other governments what was happening. We told everyone. Every human on Earth received daily updates about the refugee situation. We introduced them to the people seeking asylum. We shared their stories. We made it personal. And humans, being humans, responded exactly the way I expected. They got angry. Not at the refugees. At the idea that anyone would try to take them. Cities competed to host refugee populations. Families volunteered to sponsor individuals. Schools created integration programs. Businesses offered jobs. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. The 7 fleets arrived 6 weeks after we'd made our galaxy-wide announcement. By that time, Earth had received 52,347 refugees from 51 different species. And we'd prepared the warmest welcome imaginable for their former owners. The Vakari ambassador initiated communication. It was a different ambassador this time, one with more authority. You have made a grave error, humans. You are now harboring over 50,000 stolen assets representing 7 different sovereign nations. We demand their immediate return along with reparations for the resources expended in their retrieval. I was ready for this. We all were. Ambassador, I'm going to make this really simple for you. Every single refugee on Earth is here voluntarily. They sought asylum and we granted it. Under our laws, they are protected. Under galactic law, which you claim to follow, sentient beings have the right to seek refuge from persecution. Galactic law recognizes property rights, the ambassador countered. Galactic law recognizes the rights of sovereign nations to set their own internal policies, I shot back. And Earth's policy is simple. We don't recognize slavery. We don't recognize indentured servitude. We don't recognize any system that treats sentient beings as property. Those individuals are free citizens under our protection. Then you choose war. No, I said calmly. You're choosing war. We're choosing to protect people who asked for our help. There's a difference. The ambassador's image flickered with what I'd learned to recognize as frustration. You cannot win this war. Probably not, I agreed. But we'll make it so expensive that you'll wish you'd never started it. Do you know what's happening on Earth right now, Ambassador? Billions of humans are watching this transmission. They're watching you threaten to attack us because we won't hand over people seeking freedom. Do you understand what that does to humans? I pulled up footage from across Earth. Protests, training camps, production facilities, families saying goodbye to loved ones joining the military, children drawing pictures of the refugees they'd met at school. It unites us, I continued. Every human on this planet, regardless of nationality or religion or politics, is united in one single purpose: protecting those refugees. You want to take them? You'll have to go through 8 billion of the most stubborn, spite-driven, irrationally brave creatures in the galaxy. And I promise you, Ambassador, we'll make you earn every single one of them. The Vakari ambassador terminated the communication without another word. For the next 72 hours, the 7 fleets held position in orbit, running scans and simulations. We knew they were calculating the cost. We also knew we were running out of time. Then something unexpected happened. A new ship arrived. It was massive, easily twice the size of any vessel in the combined fleet. And it came alone. The transmission request came directly to my terminal. Personal. Encrypted. I looked at General Hawkins. Should I answer it? Do we have a choice? I accepted the transmission. The being that appeared on screen was unlike anything I'd seen before. It had features that seemed to shift and change as I watched, making it impossible to focus on any single detail. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made my teeth ache. Captain Martinez, I am eldest Korvax of the Arbitration Guild. We have come to mediate this dispute. The Arbitration Guild. We'd heard of them in our crash course on galactic politics. They were ancient, neutral, and powerful. When they showed up to mediate, both sides were expected to listen. With all due respect, eldest Korvax, I'm not sure there's much to mediate. The Vakari want us to hand over people we've granted asylum. We've refused. That's pretty straightforward. Indeed, Korvax said. Which is why we are here. The galaxy is watching this situation with great interest. Your species has challenged several fundamental assumptions about how civilizations interact. This challenge cannot be ignored. We're not trying to challenge anything, I said honestly. We're just doing what we think is right. That is precisely what makes it a challenge, Korvax replied. The Vakari and their allies operate under the assumption that property rights supersede individual autonomy. You operate under the opposite assumption. Both positions have legal precedent in galactic law. Both positions have logical frameworks supporting them. This is not a simple matter of right and wrong. It is from where I'm sitting, I muttered. Korvax made a sound that might have been laughter. That is the human perspective. Absolute moral clarity. It is refreshing, if somewhat naive. But let us discuss practical matters. The 7 fleets in orbit have sufficient firepower to destroy most of your civilization. You acknowledge this? Yes. And yet you refuse to comply with their demands. This suggests either irrational behavior or information we are not aware of. Which is it? I thought carefully about how to answer. This being could see through lies, I was certain of that. But maybe honesty was the best approach. It's neither, I said finally. It's principle. Humans have a history of fighting for principles even when it's not rational. We've fought wars over ideas. We've died for beliefs. We've sacrificed everything for concepts like freedom and dignity. Is it logical? But it's who we are. Fascinating, Korvax said. So you would truly allow billions of your people to die rather than compromise on this principle? I'd rather not test that hypothesis, I admitted. But yes, if forced to choose between living as a species that hands people over to slavery or dying as a species that stood by its principles, we'd choose death. Not because we want to die, but because life without principles isn't worth living. Korvax was silent for a long moment. Then it said something that changed everything. What if there was a third option? I'm listening. The Arbitration Guild proposes the following. Earth continues to grant asylum to any individuals seeking refuge. However, Earth also acknowledges the legal frameworks of the civilizations these individuals are fleeing. To balance these competing claims, Earth will compensate the affected civilizations for their lost property at fair market value. I blinked. You want us to buy the refugees' freedom? In essence, yes. The Vakari and their allies receive financial compensation. The refugees receive their freedom and Earth receives its desired outcome. Everyone benefits. It was elegant. It was practical. It was also completely unacceptable. No, I said flatly. Korvax's form rippled with what I interpreted as surprise. This solution addresses all parties' concerns. Why do you refuse? Because it legitimizes slavery, I said. If we pay for these people, we're acknowledging that they were property to begin with. We're telling the galaxy that slavery is acceptable as long as you're willing to pay the going rate. That's not a principle we can compromise on. Even if refusal means war? Even then. You realize this makes you extraordinarily difficult to negotiate with. Yeah, I said. We get that a lot. Korvax's form stabilized into something almost resembling a smile. I begin to understand why the Vakari find you so frustrating. Very well. If you will not agree to compensation, what solution do you propose? That was the question I'd been dreading. Because the truth was, I didn't have a solution. We'd backed ourselves into a corner where the only options were surrender or war, and we'd already ruled out surrender. But then I remembered something Tom had said during one of our planning sessions. The Vakari are bureaucrats. They care about rules and procedures. Maybe we fight them on their own ground. I propose a legal challenge, I said. The Vakari claim these individuals are their property under their laws. Fine. Let's take that claim to the Galactic Court of Sentient Rights and get a formal ruling. If the court says they're property, we'll discuss compensation. If the court says they're free beings, the Vakari drops all claims. Korvax's form brightened. A juridical solution. The Vakari would have difficulty refusing such a challenge without appearing to doubt their own legal position. Clever. However, you realize that the Galactic Court's rulings are based on precedent, and there is substantial precedent supporting property rights in cases of indentured servitude. Then we'll set a new precedent, I said. That is not how precedent works. It is if we make a good enough argument. This time Korvax definitely laughed. Your species' confidence is astounding. Very well. I will present this proposal to the Vakari and their allies. I suspect they will accept, if only because refusing would make them appear weak. But Captain Martinez, I must warn you. The Galactic Court has existed for over 100,000 years. In that time, it has never ruled that indentured servants have the right to void their contracts. You are attempting something that has never been successfully argued. Then we'll be the first, I said with more confidence than I felt. The Vakari accepted the proposal, as Korvax predicted. The case would be heard at the Galactic Court in 6 months. Until then, the refugees would remain on Earth under protected status, and both sides would refrain from military action. We had 6 months to build a legal case that could overturn 100,000 years of precedent. No pressure. The legal team we assembled was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. We had human lawyers, of course, but we also had refugee legal experts from a dozen different species. We had scholars who'd spent centuries studying galactic law. We had activists who'd been fighting slavery in their own civilizations for generations. And we had Tom, who turned out to be more than just a mathematics professor. He'd been a legal advocate in the Vakari system before he escaped. He knew their laws better than anyone. The key is in how they define property, he explained during one of our strategy sessions. Vakari law, like most legal systems in the galaxy, defines property as something that cannot make autonomous decisions. But it also recognizes that indentured servants are required to make decisions in the course of their duties. So they're acknowledging that these individuals can make decisions, I said, but claiming those decisions only count in specific contexts. Exactly. It's a logical contradiction. But it's a contradiction that's been ignored for thousands of years because it's convenient for the people in power. So we force them to address the contradiction, said Maria Chin, the human lawyer leading our team. We argue that any being capable of autonomous decision-making in any context is, by definition, not property. It's not going to be that simple, warned Zix, one of our refugee legal experts. The Vakari will argue that limited autonomy doesn't equal full autonomy. They'll point to precedents involving artificial intelligences, constructed beings, and other entities that make decisions but are still considered property. Then we differentiate, Maria said. We show that these individuals possess qualities that go beyond limited autonomy. Self-awareness, cultural identity, emotional bonds, dreams and aspirations that exist independent of their assigned functions. The strategy started to take shape. We wouldn't just argue about legal definitions. We'd put faces to the case. We'd show the court exactly who the Vakari were claiming as property. Over the next 6 months, we documented everything. The refugees' integration into human society, their relationships, their contributions, their hopes and fears. We recorded hundreds of hours of testimony. We gathered evidence of their autonomy, their creativity, their individuality. And we found something else. Something that would become the centerpiece of our case. One of the refugees, a young Vakari named Cyrix, had been keeping a journal since the day she escaped. 15 years of entries detailing her life in servitude and her life in freedom. The contrast was stark and heartbreaking. In servitude, her entries were mechanical. Completed assigned tasks. Maintained equipment. Obeyed directives. There was no personality, no emotion, no sense of self beyond her function. But her entries after escaping were completely different. She wrote about discovering music, about making friends, about falling in love with another refugee, about learning to paint and expressing emotions she'd never been allowed to feel before, about becoming someone rather than just something. This is it, Maria said when she read the journal. This is our smoking gun. We can show the court exactly what slavery does to a person, and exactly what freedom allows them to become. The day of the trial arrived. The Galactic Court was located on a neutral space station that had been built specifically for this purpose. The courtroom itself was massive, designed to accommodate representatives from hundreds of different species. The judges were 7 beings from 7 different civilizations, chosen for their experience and impartiality. Eldest Korvax sat in the center, serving as chief arbiter. The Vakari brought their own legal team, of course. 12 of their finest legal minds, backed by precedent dating back millennia. Their lead advocate was a being named Torvik, who had never lost a case in 300 years of practice. We had Maria, a human who'd been practicing law for exactly 15 years. The odds were not in our favor. Torvik opened with a presentation that was brutal in its efficiency. He walked through the legal framework of indentured servitude across the galaxy. He showed how it was recognized in 847 different legal codes. He presented evidence that the refugees had entered their contracts voluntarily. He demonstrated that they'd received the benefits specified in those contracts. He argued that allowing them to void those contracts retroactively would undermine the entire galactic economic system. It was a masterful performance. By the time he finished, I was ready to concede the case. But then Maria stood up. She didn't start with legal arguments. She started with a question. Your Honors, I'd like to begin by asking the court to consider a simple thought experiment. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and discover that a contract you signed years ago has been reinterpreted. Under this new interpretation, you no longer have the right to make decisions about your own life. You must follow directives given by another party. You cannot leave. You cannot refuse. Your thoughts, feelings, and desires are irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the contract you signed. She paused. How many of you would consider that contract valid? The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Torvik objected, arguing that the question was inflammatory and irrelevant. But Korvax allowed it. Continue, Advocate Chin. The Vakari argue that these individuals entered their contracts voluntarily. Let's examine that claim. I'd like to call Cyrix to the stand. Cyrix walked to the witness platform, her hands trembling slightly. She'd prepared for this moment for months, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She was about to face her former owners in front of the entire galaxy. Maria's questioning was gentle but thorough. She walked Cyrix through the circumstances of her contract. How she'd been born into a family with debt. How the only way to prevent her younger siblings from being taken into servitude was for her to volunteer in their place. How she'd been told it would only be for 10 years, but the contract had been extended twice due to performance issues that were never clearly defined. At any point during your servitude, were you given the option to terminate your contract? No. Were you allowed to negotiate the terms? No. Were you informed that the contract could be extended indefinitely at your supervisor's discretion? No. I learned that when they extended it the first time. So the contract you signed was not the contract you were bound to? Objection. Torvik interrupted. The modifications were made according to the provisions in the original contract. Provisions written in Vakari legal code that the witness had no training to understand, Maria shot back. Provisions that were never explained to her. Your Honors, how can we call this voluntary when one party had no understanding of what they were agreeing to? The questioning continued for hours. Maria methodically dismantled every aspect of the Vakari's claim of voluntary servitude. But the real turning point came when she presented Cyrix's journal. I'd like to read some entries from the witness's personal journal written during her time in servitude. Maria's voice filled the courtroom. Day 1847. Completed assigned tasks. Maintained equipment. Obeyed directives. Day 1848. Completed assigned tasks. Maintained equipment. Obeyed directives. Day 1849. Completed assigned tasks. Maintained equipment. Obeyed directives. She read entry after entry, each one almost identical. The monotony was crushing. Some of the judges were visibly uncomfortable. Then Maria shifted to entries written after Cyrix's escape. Day 1. I ran. I actually ran. I don't know what will happen to me, but for the first time in my life, I made a choice that was mine alone. Day 7. The humans gave me shelter. They asked me what I wanted. I didn't understand the question at first. What? I've never been asked what I want. Day 30. I heard music today. Real music, not the efficiency rhythms they played during our work shifts. I cried. I didn't know I could cry from something beautiful. Maria's voice caught as she read the final entry. Day 5475. Today I got my degree. The humans call it a master's in cultural anthropology. I call it proof that I exist. Not as a function or a contract or a piece of property, but as a person with thoughts and dreams and the ability to become something I choose. If the Vakari take me back tomorrow, they can never take this away from me. They can never erase the person I've become. The courtroom was silent. Even Torvik had no immediate response. Maria turned to face the judges. Your Honors, the Vakari claim these individuals are property. But property doesn't dream. Property doesn't hope. Property doesn't write journals about discovering who they are. Property doesn't become something new when given the chance. These are not assets. They are people. And people cannot be owned. Torvik recovered and launched into a rebuttal, arguing that emotional capacity didn't negate contractual obligations. That the refugees had accepted the terms of their service, regardless of how they felt about it. That galactic civilization depended on the stability of contracts. But something had shifted in the courtroom. The judges were no longer just listening to legal arguments. They were considering the moral implications. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Both sides presented mountains of evidence. Expert witnesses testified about the nature of sentience, autonomy, and personhood. Economists explained how the galactic economy would be impacted by various rulings. Historians provided context about how different civilizations had evolved past slavery. And through it all, the refugees themselves testified. One after another, they shared their stories. Their suffering under servitude. Their hope for freedom. Their dreams for the future. Finally, the judges retired to deliberate. We waited for 4 agonizing days. During that time, I stayed at the station with the legal team. We were too nervous to do anything but wait. On the fourth day, we were summoned back to the courtroom. The gallery was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. This ruling would set a precedent that would affect billions of beings. Eldest Korvax spoke for the court. This case has presented the court with a fundamental question. Can a sentient being with autonomous decision-making capabilities be classified as property under galactic law? The Vakari supremacy argues that contractual obligations supersede individual autonomy. The defense argues that certain qualities inherent to sentient beings cannot be contracted away. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear the next words. After careful deliberation, this court rules as follows. While contracts of service are recognized under galactic law, such contracts cannot be enforced in perpetuity against the will of sentient beings who demonstrate autonomous decision-making capabilities, self-awareness, and individual identity. The evidence presented shows that the individuals in question possess these qualities. Furthermore, the contracts in question were entered under circumstances that do not meet galactic standards for informed consent. Korvax paused and I held my breath. Therefore, this court rules that the 52,347 individuals currently residing on Earth under asylum protection are free beings, not property. The Vakari supremacy and allied civilizations have no legal claim to their return. Furthermore, this court recommends that the Galactic Council review all contracts of indentured servitude across member civilizations to ensure they meet updated standards for informed consent and include clear provisions for termination at the servant's discretion. The courtroom exploded. Cheers from our side. Outrage from the Vakari delegation. Stunned silence from many of the neutral observers. We'd won. Against all odds, we'd actually won. But as I celebrated with Maria and the rest of the team, I noticed Korvax watching me. The ancient being's expression was unreadable, but something in its gaze suggested this was far from over. The journey back to Earth took 2 weeks. When we arrived, the entire planet was celebrating. The refugees were officially free. Earth had stood up to the galaxy's slave-owning civilizations and won. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd started something much bigger than a legal case. We'd challenged the fundamental power structures of galactic civilization. We'd shown that the old assumptions about property and servitude could be overturned. We'd proven that a young, supposedly primitive species could force the galaxy to change. 3 months after the trial, I found out I was right. A delegation of refugees from 16 different civilizations arrived at Earth, seeking asylum. Not dozens this time. Thousands. They'd heard about our victory in the Galactic Court. They'd seen that freedom was possible. And behind them, their former owners were mobilizing. The Vakari decision had created a crisis. If indentured servitude could be challenged on these grounds, entire economic systems would collapse. Civilizations that had built their prosperity on the backs of servants were facing the possibility of massive uprisings. Some species responded by reforming their systems. They updated their contracts, improved conditions, and created real pathways to freedom. Others doubled down. They tightened control, increased surveillance, and prepared to fight any challenges to their authority. And Earth, having positioned itself as the beacon of freedom, became the focal point of this conflict. We were no longer just protecting refugees. We were leading a movement. Ambassador Chen found me in my office late one night, looking at the latest reports. More refugees arriving every week. More civilizations demanding we stop accepting them. More threats. More diplomatic crises. More complications. Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? She asked. Every day, I admitted. We've made enemies across half the galaxy. We're sheltering refugees we can barely support. We're at the center of a galactic crisis that could lead to war. But then I think about Cyrix reading her journal in that courtroom. I think about Kira making lattes and saving for medical school. I think about all the people who are free because we said no to bullies. I turned to face Chin. Yeah, we did the right thing. It's messy and complicated and dangerous. But it's right. Humanity is going to change the galaxy, Chin said softly. Whether the galaxy wants to change or not. That's kind of our thing, I said with a tired smile. We show up, break all the rules, and make everyone rethink their assumptions. It's gotten us into trouble before. on Earth. But this is different. This is trouble on a galactic scale. Then I guess we'll have to be ready for galactic scale solutions. 6 months later, we held the first Galactic Freedom Conference on Earth. Representatives from 41 different species attended, all of them committed to ending slavery and indentured servitude in their civilizations. We shared strategies, built networks, and created a coalition that would become known as the Free People's Alliance. The Vakari and their allies formed their own coalition, the Sovereignty Preservation Front. They argued that we were undermining the stability of galactic civilization, that economic systems built over millennia couldn't be changed overnight, that we were forcing our values on civilizations with different cultural contexts. They weren't entirely wrong. We were forcing change. We were disrupting systems that had existed for thousands of years. We were, from their perspective, dangerous radicals who threatened everything they'd built. But from our perspective, we were just doing what humans always did. Standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Fighting for freedom. Refusing to accept that slavery could ever be justified, no matter how many civilizations practiced it or how long it had existed. The galaxy was changing. And Earth, this young species that had barely made it to its own moon a century ago, was driving that change. We'd said no to the Vakari when they demanded their people back. That single word had started something that couldn't be stopped. Because that's what humans do. We say no to bullies. We protect the vulnerable. We fight for what's right even when it's not smart or safe or rational. And if the galaxy didn't like it, well, they were welcome to try and stop us. They'd find out what every dictator and tyrant in human history had learned the hard way. You can push humans pretty far. You can threaten us. You can try to intimidate us. You can bring your fleets and your weapons and your ancient legal codes. But when we say no, we mean it. And we'll back that no with everything we have. The Vakari had demanded their people back. Humanity had said no. And in doing so, we told the galaxy that a new power had arrived. A power that didn't follow the old rules. A power that would fight for freedom regardless of the cost. We were humans. And we were just getting started.